In just a short period of time, 100 days, President Biden has carved himself out to be the most pro-abortion president in American history, moving not only to undo federal pro-life policies, but directing more and more taxpayer dollars to the abortion industry. Even the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that he signed had more to do with funding abortion than providing important relief to the American people. With me now to talk about some of these lowlights of the first 100 days of the Biden administration with regard to abortion funding is U.S. Senator Steve Daines of Montana. He is the founder and chair of the Senate Pro-Life Caucus. He serves on the U.S. Senate Finance Committee. And by the way, his state is the recipient of a new congressional seat as a result of people going to Montana. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tony. We think that another seat for Montana is a good thing. If D.C. could look more like Montana, we'd be better off.
Well, it's not South, but I do like Montana. It's wide open, big sky country, and I like it.
Yeah. So does everybody else. We got a lot of population influx. So
I know. It's a good place to be. And the values that we're talking about here, the sanctity of human life, something that not only do Montana voters care about, but voters across this country. And they're not finding they're not finding a warm spot in the heart of Joe Biden.
They're not, Tony. You know, you contrast where we were with President Trump. We had the most pro-life president I think we've ever seen in terms of results and outcomes. It was remarkable to see the progress we made in fighting for the most vulnerable. Contrast that to President Biden. I think it's safe to say he's the most pro-abortion president we've ever had. And he's not just pro-choice, he's anti-life and very pro-abortion. We saw we exclude those high protections from the COVID relief bill. By the way, that's the first time in 44 years. He nixed the policy that prevents taxpayer dollars to fund abortions overseas. You know, he reinstated funding for the UN population fund that supports, as you just talked about, China's forced abortions. And then most recently dismantled our Title X protections that protected life. And so I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. And just such the drastic shift from such a pro-life president in President Trump to such a radical pro-abortion president in President Biden.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Hyde Amendment. Now, this is a provision. It's an annual rider that goes on the appropriation bill. For those outside the Beltway, we talk in these terms, and sometimes I don't know exactly what it is. The Hyde Amendment simply prevents taxpayers from being forced to fund abortions. In fact, Joe Biden supported it for years. Now, to his credit, he had this conversion on the campaign trail, so voters, those who voted for him, should have known it. But I've got a clip I want to play of him talking about this kind of conversion. This was at the Democratic National Committee in Atlanta on June 6, 2019, as he was a candidate for president. Here's a clip of what he had to say.
If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code. But I want to be clear with you. I don't want to mislead you. If in fact it was still available, I think, just as I've never attempted to impose my views on anyone else as to when life begins, I have never attempted to impose my view on who should pay for it if people fundamentally disagree with the position we take. But folks, times have changed. I don't think these guys are going to let up.
So, Senator Daines, times have changed. We have to force taxpayers to fund abortion in America.
Boy, that's just a sad comment. You think about 64 million children who have been aborted since Roe v. Wade. It just breaks your heart to see that. And I mean, yet times have changed and elections have consequences. And now we're seeing the dismantling of protections, Tony, that have been in place for 44 years. And by the way, this is something that not only had strong bipartisan support once upon a time, but the American people strongly support having these high protections, not allowing taxpayer dollars to go for abortions. That's still a popular provision. And the Democrats, led by Joe Biden, Nancy Schumer, and Chuck Schumer, are dismantling that right before our very eyes.
Right. A poll just out earlier this year, as it pertains to taxpayer funding of abortion overseas, something that was even in the COVID relief measure, is 77% of Americans oppose this. Even a majority of Democrats oppose federal funding of abortion overseas. So it's not even close. But when you go down, Senator Daines, the list of what this administration is at, it is not a stretch what you just said, that this is the most pro-abortion president in history. What the Biden administration, from my observation, and you can unpack this for us, but from my observation, the Biden administration picked up where the Obama administration left off. You know, Obama kind of ramped up even to the 11th hour doing these radical policies. It took him a while to get started. Joe Biden did this on day one.
It's remarkable, Tony, and it's virtually in every important policy area. To those of us who believe in faith and family and freedom, we're being hit on all sides. That's the fight. We're pushing back on every front. But it's breathtaking to see how quickly they've moved to positions that were virtually unthinkable. These were bipartisan positions that were had Democrats and Republicans saying, no, we're not going to allow taxpayer dollars to fund abortions. No, we're not going to support overseas abortions. And I think that's really the crux of what's happening now with this court packing discussion. You know, why do the Democrats want to add 4 Supreme Court justices? They want to undo what we did by putting Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch on the bench. It's a 6-3 court probably. God willing, the creek don't rise. Why would they want to add 4 far left justices? Well, that gives them a 7-6 majority. And, we hope and pray that we're going to have a decision that'll come before the court here sooner versus later on Roe v. Wade. They're scared to death. We've got the judge right now, I think, Tony, there's a reasonable shot we get that overturned. If you look at the fight we had in the Supreme Court, I would argue it really came back to the issue of life and abortion. That is what really ramped up the anti-Kavanaugh, anti-Gorsuch, the anti-Coney Barrett.
Senator, I think you're absolutely right. And I go back to that clip we just played of Joe Biden in June of 2019. And he said, I no longer support the Hyde Amendment. And the people cheered. I mean, it's one thing, as you said a moment ago, to be pro-choice. But what we're seeing from today's Democratic Party is they are pro-abortion. They celebrate. I mean, you have New York lighting up the Empire State Building when they pass a bill that allows you to kill newborn infants. I mean, we live in a new era that, quite frankly, is very troubling when you look, when you consider the conscience of America and the innocent blood, as you pointed out, that's being shed in this country. We got to pray. We've got to stand up for the sanctity of human life, and we've got to vote those values every opportunity we get.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we have these discussions, Tony, with our great folks out there fighting with us, praying for us to protect the most vulnerable. Let's not forget, though, it's only a 50-50 Senate. The margins are so thin at the moment, and the House is just 3 or 4 seats. And that's why we've got to stop this horrible parade of these pro-abortion Democrats and the radicals, but unfortunately it's become mainstream for the Democrats. We also have to remember we've got an election coming up in 22, Tony, and we've got a good shot to get the House back to stop this. We got a shot here to get the Senate back. And then I think this overreach, they're so far out of step in so many areas of just where most of the American people are. This is going to come back to haunt them, like we saw happen in 2010 and 2014, wave elections, but it comes down to making sure that our great supporters out there get out and exercise that precious right to vote.
You're absolutely right in comparing this to 2009 with Obamacare and the 2010 election cycle, where the Republicans were given control of the House and ultimately the entire into the Senate later on. But you've introduced a number of pieces of legislation. You're not just sitting back here wringing your hands. You're introducing legislation. Now, I know that in this Congress, it's not going to pass, but it's important to put down markers. And what I think you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying this is what the Republicans will do if we have the ability.
Yeah, well, I tell you, we have got to think about, first and foremost, just stopping late-term abortions, stopping abortions after 20 weeks, like the Pain Capable Act, where a baby can feel pain. I spoke to a group of 500 high school students over the weekend. Wonderful. They were pro-life, great patriots. And I said, Google 20 weeks. Take out your phone and Google 20-week baby. You'll look at the image of what a baby looks like at 20 weeks. Tony, think that we're debating whether or not an abortion can occur at that moment when a baby feels pain. That bill, we want to have another vote on that on the floor of the United States Senate. And as well as, of course, the baby born alive bill. It's just incredible to think that in an infanticide, it's not even an abortion bill, Tony, that's an infanticide bill.
Yeah.
To ensure that if a baby is born as a result of a botched abortion, you protect the life of the baby. It is incredible that our colleagues across the aisle have moved so far to embracing that pro-abortion agenda, they can't even stand with us on bills that the majority of people support. By the way, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say we're up against break, but nothing provides a greater contrast between where the two parties stand today than that issue of the born alive. It is amazing to me, astounding to me, that we cannot see bipartisan support for a measure that would simply say if a child survives an abortion, we give them medical aid. It's astounding. Senator, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you for your leadership in the United States Senate on that fundamental right of life.
Thanks, Tony.